Hey, everybody, welcome back to Awaken Atlanta. We have a very special interview with Dr. Joe Wolverton, constitutional attorney, founder of the Amergy Group. Joe lives to help families teach their children true history. His popular history lessons contain timeless principles of virtue and liberty.
All right. Without further ado, welcome, Joe. Welcome back.
Thanks, guys. I'm so happy to be on with you.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, this is crazy. We're just talking about how, and I want to get your constitutional perspective of this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
President Joe Biden just came out, said that there's no more pandemic, right? There's no more going on. But he will not relinquish the power of the Stafford Act of the Emergency Acts here. We're still under emergency here. And we had Addy Ads on saying, hell, well, now they can still come for your guns. They could bypass a lot of different things they could on constitutionally. But would you ever think we're in a situation where there's no more officially, there never was, in my opinion, but there's no more officially emergency, but yet we're still under emergency powers?
Yes. In fact, I remember writing about this several years ago when Obama issued an executive order declaring that in the case of any sort of civil disturbance, the president, and ironically and I suppose maudlinly, he writes in the first paragraph of his executive order, which is still in effect, neither Trump nor Biden have rescinded it. It says that per my constitutional authority, I hereby declare that should there be a civil emergency, civil disturbance, that the president assumes authority to, and he lists all the sectors of the economy that the executive branch gives itself the right to seize. And we're talking farms. It says he has the authority to seize farms, grocery stores, utility companies. There's gasoline companies, oil companies, all of this that he says that is his constitutional authority, which is rubbish and which is absolutely tyrannical. And for Joe Biden to come on and say that, yes, the pandemic is over, but we still need to, usurp this authority. It just reminds me of every tyrant throughout history, and everyone who wrote about tyrants throughout history said that if there is no emergency, a tyrant will create one. And unfortunately, most of us are so ignorant and so slavish by this point that we really don't give a damn, to be honest. We don't care if the president usurps, claims for himself authority like this, because we have been asleep for so long.
And I would add on too, Doc, is that not only most of them are asleep, but I think there's been such cognitive dissonance over the last 3 years that people are having this Stockholm syndrome where they can't think straight. I mean, you have executive orders coming out on basically becoming a transhumanism, humanism, right? It's like people can't process that. It's too much, I think.
Well, and we've got the sobering fact, guys, that for over 100 years now, we have been sending our children to Rome and been shocked when they come home praising Caesar.
Right.
And the fact is that nothing that Caesar does is really that shocking. And in fact, if you find something that the emperor, because let's make no mistake, the United States is an empire. And if you find something that the emperor does shocking, the emperor doesn't mind if you shake your fist on Facebook or if you put a funny quote on Instagram, because you're not going to do a damn thing about it. And he knows it. And you know why he knows it? Because for over 100 years, we haven't done a thing about it. We allowed the emperor to seize we didn't even require him to seize our gold. He simply said, no more gold, take it to the banks and turn it in. And we did. He simply said, you have to send your children to government mandated schools till they're 16. And we did. He simply said, we are going to issue fiat currency and you're going to accept it as legal tender. And we did. So there's nothing that he fears. And people who get online and think they're really making a difference, because I have 100,000 followers on Instagram and I make fun of Joe Biden every day. Do you know how much care he gives? None care. That's how much he gives.
Yeah.
Even if he was cognitive enough to realize that people were mocking him, he wouldn't give a damn. Yeah. Because the basic fact is, it's like Montesquieu said, tyrants will push until they come to a limit. well, what's the limit in the United States? Because it wasn't the states. We blew through that, which they were supposed to be the barrier between tyrants and the people. It wasn't the Constitution. It's like Madison said, parchment barrier. They tore through that. And it's not the people ourselves, because we have sat back and allowed ourselves to be made into slaves to the plutocrats on the Potomac. And we don't care because slavery is comfortable.
You know, a great question I want to follow up with by Danicki says, why are Republicans, and I'm not putting you in a Republican status there, you're probably more libertarian than anything. I mean, I know.
Absolutely.
But why
more anarchist than anything.
Why aren't Republicans trying to fight these executive orders in the court system like the Dems did every time Trump would pass or sign one? I mean, it seems like there's crickets on the Rhino side here.
Right. Well, that's, it's something like Trenchard and Gordon wrote. He said, you have a situation in every country throughout history where you will have people who are in charge, the plutocrats, who pretend to be from two different parties so as to divide the people, making them easier to command. And while inside the palace, they wrote, these two parties are laughing together, slapping each other on the back, and dividing up your property, right? Pretending all the while when they make public appearances, I hate the red party and I hate the blue party, when in reality, there's just a purple party.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's pretty disturbing. And Tommy, tell me, if you agree with Joe on this, is that our forefathers. Because today we're talking about hate speech, and our take was that, I don't want to get your take, our take was that hate speech is a contradictory of our freedom of speech and is to shut down dialogue. Number one, what's your take? And then two, what would be our forefathers' take today about hate speech laws?
Well, this is the thing that when people ask, what would the founding fathers say? This is a thing we don't have to guess, and you don't have to take my word for it. I want to make, I'm going to be the Wizard of Oz. I'm going to pull the curtain away and let you see the behind the scenes. There is a website that was begun by the University of Virginia, and it's carried on by the University of Virginia and Chicago. And it's called the Founders Constitution Online. If you go, an easy way to Google it is just type University of Chicago Founders Constitution. And then it'll bring you to the homepage, and you click on contents. And guys, this is probably, if we could get people to go to this website daily instead of going to the rubbish websites they go to, we could change this country in one generation. Scroll down. Every article and every clause and every amendment in the Constitution is hyperlinked with dozens of primary and secondary source documents that you can read for yourself. So it isn't a question of what would they say. We can read it. And just to refresh my memory, I read it yesterday and today, this morning, and it's simple. They universally, we're talking all of the founding fathers and all the men whose books they read that taught them about liberty, universally they say, in any society where speech is in any way curbed by a priori, meaning, prior restraint on any speech, then if not only is liberty dead, but its very shadow, as Montesquieu says, its very shadow has left your land. Wow. So we know that. We know what they would say, and we know what all the men that taught them said, that you cannot punish speech without making yourself a de facto totalitarian government. But now, guys, and this is what I say all the time, and I hope this gets through to somebody, tyrant's gonna tyrant. That is what they've done since Adam and Eve were in the garden, right? Tyrant's tyrant. Our obligation is to resist them. And it is my opinion that when it comes to hate speech, we must be so very vigilant, so very aggressive in our response, because if they take away what one generation calls hate, the next generation will make it even tighter. You won't be able to say something like, I'm a Christian, without that being defined as hate speech, because what are you doing? You're prejudicing the atheists, the Muslims, the Jews. Are you really? Of course not, right? But if we let this go, there will literally be nothing within a decade, 2 decades, that is not defined as hate speech. You will literally have to control every little thing you say, because we see it now. Mm-hmm. I can't go out and say something that's factual, historically factual, without it being called racist.
Mhm.
If something's race related, it's now racist.
Right.
Oh,
That isn't true.
I can't say anything, or I do. They say I can't say anything of that. A person who wants to be a transgender, I can't say anything. Well, you know what? You should think about it before you actually mutilate somebody's body without being considered a transphobic. Or if I say something about a gentleman who started hate speech happened to have the Jewish consent, I'm called the anti-Semitic. So this is all ways, in my opinion, to shut down dialogue without ever getting information out, which I think is like dangerous and brings us to that banana republic you're talking about.
Right. And we have to remember that, in Anglo-American law, in order for something to be criminal or actionable legally, you have to have two things that happen at the same time: a bad thought and a bad act. And since the year 900 in England and America, speech is not considered an act. Right? Now, you may have speech that is joined with an act, and that's actionable. For example, the traditional standing in a theater and yelling fire. That's not just you speaking, that's you acting and encouraging, a riot. But if I get online and say, anything, I can't even think of anything off the top of my head because they make it so everything is hate speech. But I'm just saying, you cannot. Hate speech, listen, and maybe this is the most controversial thing I've said already, is hate speech is precisely the type of speech protected by the First Amendment.
Right.
Love speech, who's going to restrict love speech? If I get out and say, I love me some transgenders, boy, I wish everybody would have bizarre mutilations. No one's gonna hate me for that. Even the Republicans are gonna be like, oh, don't say anything because that'll make us look like we're transphobic. Don't say anything right? So hate speech is exactly the kind of speech that in free societies is protected by the law.
Right.
Well,
And when the law is converted, that is to say, perverted, to punish that which should be protected, then we need to roll back the clock and make the answer to 2022 1776.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here. I know your book, The Founder's Recipe, I mean, you pretty much focus on these inspirational men that got our founding generation off their feet and doing something on an inspirational level. We're just around this hate speech topic now within schools. I mean, they're pretty much saying, hey, kids, your parents could be prejudiced and say hate speech things to you if you feel like a fairy tale or a princess or a dog or whatever you feel like. Let me take your hand and walk you down this transhuman agenda route. And that's happening in public schools now through Title IX and the update they did with the 50th anniversary thing. I mean, what can you say to parents today? I mean, what's the option there for them?
I would say your only option, if you really love freedom and you really love your children, is take them out of the indoctrination camps. Because I will refer you to the New York public school system, where they have placed cameras in the classroom. Now, what was the justification? School shooting. Now, the cameras, however, have been used to justify CPS visits to homes of kids. If you have, so you'll have these cameras. Now, the kids aren't told and the parents aren't told. Wow. Now, there, of course, are some parents and some kids who are like, why are there a camera in my room? Well, these cameras, and they include audio, not just video. If you hear a kid, a little kid, a second grade kid, who hears his dad say something like, being gay is a sin. And so the teacher, who now must teach, 6-year-olds the proper way to have anal sex, when the teacher is describing that and little Johnny raises his hand and says, my daddy says being gay is a sin, that's all recorded.
Wow.
And then the teacher is obligated by state law to report that to her superiors, who then report it to CPS, who then make a visit. And Google this, CPS in every state is awarded $86,000 for every child removed from a home.
Wow.
It's nothing but human trafficking.
Right.
excused under the shield of law.
Let's stay there for a second.
Google it, guys. Google it. You will be shocked.
Yeah.
I'm shocked right now because I have no doubt that that's true because it goes right in line with what they're doing. Let's stay there for a second, Doc, because that is so horrific to know. It's like the perfect setup. The perfect setup to pull your children away from, and we know that's part of the transhumanistic agenda. They have to destroy the nuclear family. They got to destroy the family rights, and they got to pull the kids away. And so now the kids doesn't have to even go along with what the school wants. They can just be going along with the family wants and still have your child taken away. That's not.
There's an example, and I've written about this. You can Google my name in New York public schools, and there's an example of a teacher is talking about, violence, gun violence, armed violence. And this one kid raises his hand and says, well, my dad owns guns and he's never done anything. Boom. Taken from his home, put in foster care, where he is abused, where he is raped by the foster father. Now, does CPS go to the foster family? Hell no.
Right.
Oh, the only reason they would is to move it to another foster family so they can send the invoice to DC and say 86,000 more, please.
Yeah.
Right? It's literally human trafficking. But guys, I mean, this is where I come to. Yes, all that is shocking and perverse. And as the famous bumper sticker says of George Washington, me and my homies would have been stacking bodies by now. All of that is true. All of that is true. However, the parents who find out, and you see the school board meetings, and it cracks me up because you'll see dad, I'm not letting my kids be taught to, blah, blah, blah. But guess what he does the next morning? Puts them on the bus back to that school.
Yeah.
So don't blame New York. Don't blame New York law for being perverse. I'm going to blame you for being a parent who, with your lips draw nigh unto family, unto the perpetuation of the family, but with your action, with your driving habits, you deny them because you drop your kids off there. Don't do that. You talk about cognitive dissonance, man. How about for 18 years, 13 years, you hear your parents say what a horrible place school is, but then you realize every morning they put you on a bus to this place that they denigrate all day and all night. What does that do to you as a child? My dad hates public school. My dad drops me off every day for 13 years at public school. What does that say to you? That causes cognitive dissonance. And guess what? When you demonstrate the effects of that cognitive dissonance as a 6-year-old, guess what your teacher's going to do? Recommend that you go see the special ed teacher and you get some Adderall to calm you down.
Right. Yeah. And
then they got you, man. Then they've got you because now they've altered your brain chemistry so that you're a good little citizen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? And now not only do you say daddy has guns but doesn't kill people, you say, my daddy shouldn't have guns. That's terrible. Guns kill people.
Exactly, man. Yeah.
And there goes the support for the Second Amendment, and and of course the support for the First Amendment with hate crimes is already gone. You ask a kid right now, you go on the street, I don't care if it's a blue state or a red state, you ask, are hate crimes good? Are hate crimes good for everyone? And they're going to go, majority of them go, yeah, absolutely. You shouldn't be hateful to anybody. You should be able to lock people up if they say hateful things. And that's so disturbing on every level.
I was invited to debate at the Arizona State University Law School, and I'd never been to the campus. And, I walked on the campus and I saw these yellow boxes everywhere. Well, not everywhere, but I saw these yellow boxes here and there. And so I saw what I thought was a professor walking by and said, hey, what are these yellow boxes? He's like, oh, those are the free speech zones. I'm like, what does that mean? So when I got to the law school and I was sitting there and I'm like talking to the other people on the panel, I'm like, what are these yellow free speech? Oh, well, if you're standing inside those yellow boxes, you're allowed to speak freely. Because then that gives everybody notice that if they are triggered by things, they can avoid those zones. And I said, that is the most insane thing. And they're like, no, that prevents so many people from being hurt, from being triggered. They're like, depression's a real thing, Joe. We don't want somebody walking by, hearing someone say something about a very controversial topic, and then that person going home and not being able to finish their college career. I was just like, whoa.
Yeah.
And again, guys, I'm sorry, but every crime is a hate crime.
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously?
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
And when it comes to that, okay, hate crime, I don't care. Every crime is a hate crime.
Yep.
I don't care what color the victim is or what color the perpetrator is. You're doing it because something's messed up in you, and you, for that moment at least, hate whatever's happening. But hate speech, guys, that not only is that not a thing, but the very concept of hateful speech. I'm telling you, go to that Founders Constitution, read I don't know, I think there's 30
What is the
documents on
website
just
again,
that.
Joe? Put this up.
It's Founders Constitution Online. And the quick way to get to it is Google University of Chicago Founders Constitution. It'll be the first thing that pulls up. Click on contents, scroll down to Amendment 1, and it says free speech. Click on it, and I guarantee you there are 30 documents, primary and secondary source documents, explaining where the founding fathers and everybody that they read, and I think the earliest document is, maybe from 1600, and it's saying hateful speech, destructive speech is exactly the kind of speech that is supposed to be protected in free societies. The only time anything said, no matter how vile, and if we all agree it's horrible, right? If we all agree that speech is horrible, it should be protected in free societies and should only be punished when it is married to criminal overt actions.
Right.
And speech is not, I don't care what those bloody octogenarian black-robed oligarchs say. Speech is not an act, man.
Mhm.
Because guess what? In the law, which I was an attorney for many years, if I say, I'm going to go over there to those Awaken Atlanta boys and I'm going to kill them. Well, guess what? I'm in Memphis. For me to kill you, it's going to take a little work,
Yeah.
right? And so if I come to your studio and I'm rocking a pistol, maybe we got a problem. But if I'm sitting in my cozy little house in Memphis saying, I'm going to kill you, that's not really a crime, man.
Exactly.
Because there's nothing been done.
Mm.
Because I don't know about you, and maybe this is just me and the way I am, but I would say 99% of the things I say every day could be classified as hate speech.
Yeah.
Right? Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Without a
Oh, yeah.
doubt. And it depends on who is in charge. Jordan Peterson mentioned that, he was being challenged, and this, college
Right.
kid was given this whole leftist perspective of it. And he's laughing. He's like, listen, it all depends who's in charge of what hate speech. And it's already covered underneath our crimes anyway. And it's already, like I said, all crimes are hate speech. So we have just gone off the railing right now of logic and common sense and critical thinking when it comes to these laws, to the point where we are being shut down from a very fascist perspective. This is the most dangerous times to be alive in reference to freedom of speech and freedom of defending your own life, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. But I would say with that danger comes great opportunity.
Okay, let's talk about
When would the contrast be greater between pansy and patriot than today?
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
When would this is a time, and it's like I say, James Madison Sr. didn't set it off.
Mm.
Thomas Jefferson's dad didn't set it off. And so, because by the time those kids, and they were kids when this all went down, they were 20-year-old, 20, 22 years old.
Wow.
When this stuff went down, yeah, we think about it as white-haired people. Madison was 22 when it went down.
No kidding.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, think about, I don't know how old, I'm old. I am much older than 22. But think about that, man. I love when people say this, and I quote Demosthenes, the great Greek orator, who was rehearsing. He was giving a speech in Athens against Philip, Alexander the Great's dad. And he was saying, yeah, times are bad, but that's actually kind of good because it's going to make it where patriots finally have the opportunity to show that they live by the principles they claim to espouse. And I think that's true of today, man. We have to have a generation of people unafraid of the consequences, because let's get it right. Our founding fathers, they didn't have a canoe. when they started the war with England. And England in the Philadelphia harbor had ships, warships in the Philadelphia harbor with sailors and soldiers on it that outnumbered the civilian population of Philadelphia.
Wow.
But guess what? That didn't stop those 50 dairy farmers from standing in Lexington Green and saying, let's set this off now.
Right.
And that's what we need. But how do we do that? We have to learn from history and say, we're not going to have a generation of people stand up and force this beast back inside its cage until we get a generation of kids who aren't drugged up and indoctrinated from the age of 5 to 18. It's not going to happen, guys. We got to have this generation of parents who say, do you know what? I realize that what these guys are saying on, Awaken Atlanta, I realize it is true. And rather than create cognitive dissonance in my children, I'm going to keep them home and make the sacrifices it takes to teach them the supremacy of the family, to teach them the principles that we claim to value. I'm not going to create the cognitive dissonance by saying, go to school, Johnny. What grade did you get, Johnny? And then at night saying, I hate public school. Well, do you? You must not hate it much. You must hate me more because you drop me off there every morning.
It's hard truth. It's tough love right there. And
all truth is hard, brother.
Yeah.
All truth is hard.
And right? But it needs to be said, and people need to start making decisions today on this level. And one last question. I know we got to get going here in a minute.
Yes.
But give me who's some of your favorite forefathers or influencers of the forefathers that you wish that was here today in either in a public or a power position who could actually articulate or take on what's going on today, if any of them.
Easy. I'm gonna give you 3 names. Google these guys, and if you need something to fire you up, to keep you amped up for the fight, just drop your finger on any page of these 2 things. So the first 2, they wrote as a pair, as a partnership, John Trenchard and Thomas Gordon. They wrote letters called Cato's Letters in the 1720s in England. Guys, I don't care which one you read one of Cato's letters, you will get fired up. Those are the first 2. The last one, Algernon Sidney, wrote a book called Discourses Concerning Government. He wrote it in the 1680s, 1660s. Read any page. Just drop your finger on a page. If we could get those, and we don't need them to come back, man, because guess what? Everything they ever wrote is available for free 24 hours a day on the internet in English. I mean, they were Englishmen, so they wrote in English. And it's modern English. It's not hard to understand. Right? It's the 1700s. You can understand that stuff. And it's not Goeth, it's not King James, actually.
Right.
And so you read anything. And this is all it would take. And this is why, when I teach these classes online, everybody's like, why have I never heard this stuff before? Because it violates the narrative, man.
Mm.
These people are not going to let you read stuff that inspires you to stack bodies. I literally yesterday was on the phone doing an interview, and it's because one of these Cato's letters, they say, people are always encouraging us to be more moderate, so I will be moderate. Rather than invent new ways, I say we just hang all the tyrants and hang them speedily.
Yeah.
Now you tell me they're going to teach. Now this is stuff that James Madison his mother read him these letters when he was a child. Okay. So, and same with Jefferson. Can you imagine if instead of sending kids to school and be like, Dick has a friend Jane, Jane has a dog, Dick and Jane are friends, Dick and Jane love their friend Pat, who isn't a boy or a girl, right?
Right.
Instead of doing that, if we read them like our founding fathers, let's hang them and hang them speedily.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm not making this up. Do it. And when, Algernon Sidney says, why would we even tolerate a tyrant unless tyranny lives in our heart? So when you realize that you're being ruled by a tyrant, your first Christian obligation, he says, is to dispatch the tyrant.
Right.
Well, those type of words that this generation needs to hear more so than ever before, because people have abdicated their belief that they don't have the right to defend their lives or their family lives. And that's, of course, our Second Amendment, right? And we have given that away because state has been so pounding us because we indoctrinate our kids in our school system. Wouldn't you agree?
Look, dude, if there was one thing, if people often say to me, if you had one wish, what would it be? It's that parents would stop sending their kids to the indoctrination camps, because I don't care. Listen, your kid's going to be better off if you let him sit on the iPad all day watching ridiculous videos. He will be better off because at least he will know that mom and dad are my sovereigns, that mom and dad are in charge, not Mrs. Smith at school who says daddy's a domestic terrorist because he owns guns.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And then send CPS to take you out of your home. I mean, that's what we need. If I could have one wish, it would be that parents who really, really love their children, who really understand the supremacy of the family, and who really want to reestablish traditional values in this country would do the hard thing and quit sending their kids to Rome and then complaining when they praise Caesar.
Excellent.
Because they're not only going to praise Caesar, they're going to obey him,
Exactly.
and they're going to require their parents to obey him.
Well, it's the state of affairs. But Joe, thank you very much. And people can catch you and get real true education on your courses where? What's the website?
MRGgroup.com. It's AMARGI group.com.
You guys definitely check it out. Just send them there. Take your kids out of school and send them to Joe's website there.
Yeah,
and
we'll square you away.
There you go. That's all you need to do. Doc, thanks for coming on and sharing your wisdom once again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. I appreciate all you guys are doing. Really do.